This 16-year-old girl disappeared in the winter of 2009 in the Russian city of St. Petersburg. The search was conducted for several weeks, but she was not found alive. Her severed head was found in a bag in the trash. The rest of the body parts were scattered around the city. Some parts could not be found. Investigators decided that they were eaten by cannibals, who baked the meat in the oven with onions and potatoes. Hi guys, in this video I'll tell you about the murder of 16-year-old schoolgirl Karina Buduchyan. She was not only dismembered but allegedly also eaten by her Goth friends. However, this story is not about cannibalism. This is the story of how a teenage girl fell in love with a bad boy who was a real grandiose narcissist, and she lost her life because of it. Who among us hasn't fallen in love with bad boys in high school? However, for Karina, this love ended tragically because this guy literally used her and threw her away. He threw her dismembered body like unnecessary garbage into the trash. And he baked part of her body in the oven with onions and potatoes and ate it with his friend. And this didn't happen in wild African tribes. This happened in the big city of St. Petersburg, also called Russia's cultural capital. I hope this story will teach young girls to be more careful not to fall in love with bad boys and narcissists who throw their victims into the trash, sometimes metaphorically and sometimes literally, as happened to our heroine. Karina Buduchyan was a 16-year-old high school student. She studied well and dreamed of a great future. Next year, she was supposed to finish school and was going to enter the university to study journalism. She was the only child of her parents. Karina lived in an ordinary city apartment with her mother, father, and grandmother. They were a good family, but not rich at all. Therefore, after classes, Karina sometimes had to work as a promoter. She posted leaflets and thus received small pocket money. The parents simply adored their girl and dreamed she would have a great future. However, Karina's plans were destroyed when she met a fatal love. One day, the girl and her friends attended a concert of the Gothic musical group Cherie. The soloist of this group was 19-year-old Maxim Glovatskych. He was a very shocking and charming young man. He was only 3 years older than Karina, but there was a big difference between them. She was a good girl from a loving family. He was a bad guy with a dark past. Maxim didn't study anywhere, sometimes worked as a butcher at the market, and his favorite pastime was concerts and shocking performances. He loved the goth subculture, dyed his hair black, and dressed all in black. Looking at him, one could be horrified. However, he enjoyed enormous popularity among their circle, and young girls simply adored him. Maxim had many girlfriends, but mainly frivolous, fleeting relationships. He never took girls seriously and cynically called many of them meat. He knew how to make people fall in love with and charm him. I believe this guy had narcissistic personality disorder. Judging by his online posts, he considered himself significant and never blamed himself for anything. Moreover, he had a criminal record. Cases were brought against him for animal cruelty and threats to kill. Maxim was also in a psychiatric clinic with a diagnosis of mental disorder. As you can see, such a person cannot be called normal. He was probably a skilled manipulator, so young girls liked him so much. He charmed not only girls but also men. Maxim had a best friend, Yuri Mazhinov. However, these relationships were not equal. Maxim was the leader and Yuri was something of a servant and bodyguard. Maxim manipulated people so skillfully that they were ready to do anything for him. Therefore, Yuri served Maxim and did all the housework. The friends lived together in a rented apartment with their friend Ekaterina. By the way, Yuri also had a criminal past and was convicted of robbery, so these guys were worth each other. They often held parties at home, drinking and sleeping with girls. Maxim had many fans who dreamed of going to his home and fulfilling his wishes. And unfortunately, among his fans was Karina Buduchyan. The girl first saw Maxim at a concert of his musical group, Cherie. He may not have been a talented musician, but he was charismatic. Therefore, the audience was delighted with his singing. Karina immediately fell in love with this crazy guy who behaved freely and neglected public opinion. A 16-year-old schoolgirl came up to meet him after the concert, and they exchanged phone numbers. After that, she constantly thought about him and dreamed of meeting him again. Karina also became interested in the Gothic subculture and began wearing black things and looking like her idol, but Maxim never took her seriously, often complaining that this girl was too obsessive. Sometimes she really annoyed him with her calls, and he even invited his friends to kill her as a joke. Who would have thought that this joke would come true? At the same time, Maxim didn't mind having fun with another girl fan, so he could later eliminate her as an unnecessary thing. So he decided to invite her to another party at his house. The guy cynically asked the 16-year-old schoolgirl to bring several bottles of alcoholic drinks with her. He also hinted that they might have intimacy. And when he hung up, he told his friends that another piece of meat was coming to visit him. This is what he called all the girls with whom he had not yet had intimacy. But Karina was happy. Finally, she will be able to be close to her idol. The young girl thought a lot about this guy. She didn't know him because they were not romantically involved and had only seen each other a few times before this meeting. Karina was still just a child. She had toys in her room and wrote beautiful poems about love. Most likely she was still a virgin and had no idea how cruel men could be. Therefore, when he invited her to an apartment, she agreed, bought alcohol as he asked, and went there with a friend. Before this, she warned her parents that she would stay overnight with a friend to prepare her homework. However, in the morning she didn't return home. The parents were worried because the girl had never left home without warning. However, that day the police refused to start searching. 16-year-old schoolgirls often leave home. However, Karina didn't return home the next day, and a week later it became clear that something really terrible had happened to her. Karina's friend remained silent for a long time and said she knew nothing about her whereabouts. A few weeks later, police made a gruesome discovery. Karina's head was wrapped in a black bag among the trash cans. The remaining parts of her body were found in another part of the city, also among garbage, wrapped in a black bag. Some parts of her body were never found. It became clear that Karina was brutally killed and dismembered. But who could have killed her and why? After the investigation, the police got on the trial of Maxim Glovatskych and Yuri Mazhnov. The guys were taken into custody and soon confessed. According to the official version, the murder occurred in a rented apartment on January 19, 2009. Maxim and Yuri threw a party where the owner of the apartment, Ekaterina Zinovьeva, and two other guests were present. They drank alcohol and had fun. Soon Karina and her friend joined them, but they communicated mainly with Maxim Glovatskych. Karina's friend felt uncomfortable in the company of drunk people and soon left the party, while Karina decided to stay because she wanted to spend time with her idol. The rest of the guests also soon left. Only Yuri Mazhnov and the owner of the apartment, Ekaterina Zinovyeva, remained. Maxim and Karina decided to lock themselves in the bathroom to have intimacy. Further events led to Karina's death, but what happened is still unclear. The fact is that each character in this story tells his own version of events. First, let's look at the official version of events. However, you will understand that this version seems very strange and illogical. When the police caught Maxim and his friend Yuri, both guys allegedly immediately confessed to the murder. They stated that they killed the girl by mutual agreement because she was unpleasant to them and bothered Maxim too much with her obsession. When Maxim and Karina locked themselves in the bathroom, Maxim sneezed 3 times. This was a prearranged signal for Yuri to join them. After that, the guys began to drown Karina in water, and when she died, they flushed the bathtub and dismembered the body. The boy's neighbor also witnessed the murder. The owner of the apartment, Ekaterina Zinovyeva, confirmed that Karina was there on the night of the murder. She also heard a strange noise at night, but the guys told her to go to bed and not to worry. When she left for work in the morning, the Goths got rid of the body. Maxim was mainly involved in dismembering the body, as he had extensive experience as a butcher. Afterward, they put the body parts in a suitcase, took the remains outside, and scattered them in garbage dumps. At the same time, they left some parts of the body at home, baked them in the oven with onion and potatoes, and ate them. And when they were asked why they did it, they answered that they were simply hungry. After the murder, the guys sold the girl's property, a mobile phone, a camera, jewelry, and clothes, and received some money. This story was immediately picked up and replicated by local media. The case had a particular resonance since it was not just a murder but actual cannibalism, which rarely happens. This version of the murder excited everyone and brought enormous success to the media. Everyone remembered this story as the case of a girl eaten by Gothic cannibals. However, no one cared what happened and whether Karina was really eaten or this story was just made up. No examination has confirmed that the meat baked in the oven the day after the murder was human. Maxim and Yuri themselves later categorically denied that they ate parts of Karina's body. It should be taken into account that the justice system in Russia, to put it mildly, is very far from ideal. The police often use torture. Experiencing incredible torments of pain, detainees are usually ready to admit even to what they did not do. Maxim and Yuri later admitted that they were indeed subjected to torture. Therefore, later in court, they retracted their original testimony and stated that they did not eat human flesh. However, no one listened to them anymore because everyone liked the story about the eaten girl much more than just about a domestic murder. At the trial, Maxim and Yuri presented a different version of events. Both guys refused to admit guilt and blamed the murder on each other. According to Maxim Glovatskych, he really invited Karina home and then was intimate with her in the bathroom. However, at this time, Yuri burst into the bath and interrupted their relationship when Maxim went to the balcony and smoked. At this time, according to him, Yuri began to intimidate Karina and drowned her. According to him, the motive for the murder was the jealousy of a friend, since Maxim spent too much time with his fans. At the same time, Maxim admitted that he really helped his friend dismember the body and get rid of it. At the same time, he categorically denied that he fried and ate Karina's body. Yuri also refused to plead guilty to Karina's murder. He said he spent most of his time in Maxim's company as his bodyguard and cared for the household. According to him, on the night of the murder, he accidentally entered the bathroom where he found Karina and Maxim, but immediately left as the enraged Maxim shouted at him. Yuri didn't try to go into the bathroom anymore. Then, according to him, Maxim came out of the bathroom and said he accidentally drowned Karina during intimacy. The friend feared they would be imprisoned and decided to remove the body. Before this, Maxim allegedly drew a pentagram on Karina's chest and called for Satan. Next, they dismembered the body and then got rid of it together. Yuri also denied the fact of cannibalism, saying that they bought the meat cooked the next day in a store. The press, in turn, put forward many other versions of the murder. Some, for example, believe it was a ritual murder. Others believe that the Goths killed their girl because of a quarrel and ideological differences. For many mass media, this story became a reason for attacks on the Gothic subculture. Many opponents of this phenomenon expressed that Goths are dangerous people who cultivate death and even proposed banning the Gothic subculture altogether. But as for me, I don't think Gothic had any influence on the story. It was much more influenced by the fact that Maxim Glavatsky had a mental disorder. Moreover, he and his friend had criminal records and led an immoral lifestyle, with parties, drinking, and many casual love affairs. And in my opinion, the main culprit in this story is Maxim Glavatsky. Judging by his friends' comments, his posts on the internet, and his behavior on video, he was a grandiose narcissist who considered himself a great person. He could use people, especially girls, to his advantage, and then throw them away as useless and like a broken toy in the trash. He changed many girls and treated them just like a piece of meat. Probably during intimacy he played too much and actually accidentally strangled the girl who was in his complete power. Such people are also unusually deceitful and cowardly. They never admit their guilt and portray themselves as victims. This is typical behavior of a narcissist, and the worst thing is that many people around Maxim still don't believe in his guilt. When Maxim was sentenced to 19 years in prison and Yuri to 18 years, all their friends and relatives were outraged and called for the boys to be released. Maxim's charisma and ability to influence people was so great that everyone around him continued to believe that he was an excellent innocent guy, despite irrefutable evidence of his involvement in Karina's murder. Maxim Glavatsky was such an immoral person that he decided to sue the parents of Karina, whom he killed. The reason for this was allegedly insulting to the girl's mother. The guy said that Karina's grief-stricken mother called him obscene names when he was being escorted to trial. In response, he decided to sue her to receive compensation for moral damages. Like any narcissist, Maxim was a person without empathy. He didn't realize how much grief he brought to others, whom he deprived of his only daughter and hope for the future. Karina's mother was treated in a psychiatric clinic for several months due to a nervous breakdown, but Maxim didn't care at all. In prison, he also behaved as if he had not done anything terrible. He took part in musical performances and even got married. It's hard to believe, but one of his female fans, who knew him before prison, was madly in love with him and agreed to marry him. Therefore, his life in prison was not so bad. Once, a documentary was made about Maxim Glavatsky. The film's director, Tanya Bajenova, interviewed the former Goth while he was in prison. She was so fascinated by him that she portrayed him in the film Case of Cherie as an innocent guy who became a victim of an unfair judicial system. The film presents facts that prove that Maxim and Yuri did not eat anyone and the murder was accidental. However, the whole story looks like these guys are the victims, not the poor girl Karina, whose body was thrown into the trash. Perhaps the Goth friends really did not eat the human body and didn't plan to kill the girl. However, the fact is that they didn't want to take responsibility for their act and disposed of the body most terribly and then denied their guilt. The fact is that Karina's body was found dismembered in a garbage dump, and this is enough to under no circumstances justify the killers. Like a typical narcissist, Maxim Glovatskych never admitted his guilt. In an interview for the documentary, he says his biggest mistake was confessing to cannibalism. Just think about it. He believes that this was the biggest mistake in his life, and not that he took the life of a 16-year-old girl. And the worst thing is that many of his friends and fans are still on his side. Even during the trial, Karina's heartbroken parents received many threats from so-called Maxim's fans. Today, Maxim is no longer alive. In 2017, after spending 7 years in prison, he took his own life. Do you think he did it because he could not get over the guilt of the murder he committed? Not at all. He decided to do this because the runes told him so. At least that's what he himself admitted in his last interview before doing this. However, even after so many years, his friends and fans continue to grieve for him, and girls continue to confess their love to him on his pages on the internet. Like a typical narcissist, Maxim Glovatskych knew how to charm, make people fall in love with him, and pretend to be innocent. However, he was truly evil, a mentally ill man who believed he could do anything. He considered himself great and infallible, and the people he met on his way were just a piece of meat that could be thrown into the trash as unnecessary. And I think this story should be helpful for all girls who should avoid such guys if they don't want to end up in the trash, literally or figuratively. It's all for today. Goodbye, and remember, evil is near.